Many times, many things and many people were like the sand in your hand. The tighter you held it, the easier it was to lose it. Yi Xian collected his thoughts and walked out of the pawn shop. Looking at the horizon, Yi Xian took in a deep breath. With a light gesture of his finger, a ray of sword light flew up and disappeared into the horizon in the blink of an eye. Unrestrained sword heart. With that epiphany just now, his sword Dao had also improved significantly. It could be said that he could now fight against a self-release realm expert like the Pope without the help of the World Prison Pagoda or the power of his bloodline. After all, he was also a fake self-release realm expert. However, there was a problem. His current enemies were not just self-release realm experts but those above self-release realm. The godly kingdom of Shumi. He had not forgotten about this place. Mu Nianyan had suppressed the godly kingdom of Shumi and bought him half a year of time. Half a year. As if thinking of something, Yi Xian turned into a ray of sword light and disappeared. In the following period of time, the fifth dimension completely calmed down because there was no movement from the Dao world. Dao world. At this time, Jiang Yu's Dao World Alliance was growing larger and larger. There were 70 self-release realm experts. It had to be said that this lineup was very terrifying. It could be said that all the self-release realm experts of the Dao world had been gathered by him. Of course, that Dao village was excluded. Although he was becoming stronger, Jiang Yu was becoming more low-key. This was because he had suffered too many losses in the past. Although he knew that the Dao scripture was in the hands of the fifth dimension's Tendo, Jiang Yu did not go find Mu Nianyan. Since the godly kingdom of Shumi knew that the Dao scripture was in Mu Nianyan's hands but did not go steal it, this was enough to prove many things. Moreover, what made him most afraid was that the fifth dimension's Tendo had taken away the book house and the Pope right under their noses. How terrifying was this strength! Thus, he did not dare go find Mu Nianyan. Moreover, there was no need to find Mu Nianyan. The godly kingdom of Shumi had told him this information because they wanted to use him as a spear. He was not in a hurry right now. In any case, in his opinion, there were many people more anxious than him. In this game, whoever was anxious would suffer. On this day, a woman came to the Immortal Pavilion. This person was the Dao village's Li Qing. Inside the pavilion, Jiang Yu looked at Li Qing. "Miss, is something the matter?" Li Qing smiled. "Pavilion Master Jiang should know that the book house is not in the hands of my Dao village." Jiang Yu nodded, "Yes." Li Qing looked at Jiang Yu. "Then, Pavilion Master Jiang, do you know who has the book house?" Jiang Yu smiled. "In the hands of the fifth dimension's Tendo." Fifth dimension's Tendo. Li Qing frowned. But for some reason there were rumors that he obtained the Dao scripture. Yi Xian asked, "Did he say who it was?" The big sister said, "No. He was just guessing." Actually, now that I think about it, it wasn't just the Dao world powerhouses who participated in the siege of the Yi clan. There should be powerhouses from other worlds too. Yi Xian asked, "What do you mean?" The big sister said, "If it was just a self-release realm powerhouse, Mr. should be able to deal with it." Yi Xian was silent. The big sister said again, "That battle was very tragic." Yi Xian looked around and said softly, "I can see that." After saying that, he walked into the depths of the city. Inside the city, there were dilapidated walls and weeds everywhere. It was incomparably desolate. This was once the most prosperous place in the Dao world because the Yi clan's ancestor, Yi Lanting, was the #1 powerhouse in the Dao world. At that time, the Yi clan was incomparably glorious. Unfortunately, with Yi Lanting's disappearance, the Yi clan gradually declined. It was not easy for the Yi clan to produce Yi Qingji, but he encountered an unexpected disaster. It had to be said that the Yi clan was still quite miserable. At that moment, Yi Xian suddenly stopped in his tracks. Not far in front of him was a dilapidated hall that was covered in weeds and exuded a pungent smell of grass. The reason Yi Xian stopped was that his prison pagoda was reacting. Yi Xian took out the prison pagoda, which vibrated gently as if it was responding to something. Yi Xian said, "Big sister?" The big sister said softly, "There might be something inside." Yi Xian nodded and pointed with his fingers. A wisp of sword light flew out and the weeds that covered the hall disappeared in an instant. Yi Xian walked toward the dilapidated hall. At that moment, a voice rang out in Yi Xian's mind. "Do you really want to go in?" It was the 9th floor's voice. Yi Xian frowned slightly. "What's wrong?" The 9th floor's voice said in a deep voice, "Kid, I feel that something is wrong." Yi Xian glanced at the hall and asked, "Senior, do you feel something?" The 9th floor replied, "I just feel that something is wrong." Yi Xian looked at the hall and scanned it with his spiritual consciousness. However, he did not feel anything. Yi Xian thought about it and turned to leave. Since the 9th floor had said that something was wrong, then there was definitely a problem. He did not want to court death. He would not do anything if he could. At that moment, a voice suddenly came from behind him. Since you're here, why don't you come in and have a seat? At this moment he was no longer thinking about the martial arts that those afterimages had shown him, but all the martial arts that he had learned in the past. This included the sword of life and death taught by the plain-dressed woman and the sword-drawing technique taught by the green-robed man. But when he was demonstrating the sword arts that he had learned in the past, the afterimages disappeared for some reason. Behind Yi Xian, Yi Jiming stared at him. The sword arts that Yi Xian had demonstrated, especially the sword of life and death and ultimate heaven-slashing sword-drawing technique, were not purely sword arts. They were sword arts that embodied the concept of swordsmanship. In the past, Yi Xian had only learned the form but not the essence. But now Yi Xian was not just learning the form but the essence. Suddenly Yi Jiming turned around and saw a middle-aged man standing beside her. The middle-aged man wore a purple robe. His long hair draped over his shoulders and his face was covered with stubble. Yi Jiming retracted her gaze. He's not the owner of this place. The middle-aged man looked at Yi Xian from afar with a complicated look in his eyes. I see. As he spoke, his body gradually turned illusory. He had been here before but he had stopped here. He was unwilling to give up so he decided to stay here. But now that he saw Yi Xian he suddenly understood. Yi Jiming did not speak. She knew that the man beside her was no ordinary person in the past. But that was no longer important. There were some hurdles that could not be overcome, and everything else would turn into fleeting clouds. On the road to martial arts, it was unknown how many amazing super experts had died. The only difference was that some people had been remembered, but most of them did not even have a name left behind. Right at this moment Yi Xian, who was nearby, suddenly stopped. At the instant he stopped, countless afterimages suddenly surged towards him from all directions. All of these afterimages held swords in their hands, and then they rapidly demonstrated their swordsmanship. Every afterimage demonstrated a different swordsmanship. One sword transformation. Yi Xian opened his eyes and looked at the executing heaven sword in his hand. The executing heaven sword trembled slightly and let out a sword cry. Yi Xian smiled. Sword transformation. What realm was above the unrestrained sword heart? Yi Xian did not know, because Mu Nianyan had never told him. But for him he had already found a path. To him, above the unrestrained sword heart was sword transformation. My sword can transform into tens of thousands of things. And this transformation was not just a transformation, it was a variable. At this moment he had found his own path on the path of swordsmanship, a path that was different from others. No matter what realm was above the unrestrained sword heart, Yi Xian's realm was sword transformation. For example, when you erased the source of this place, it's extremely harmful to the universe. As she spoke, she looked at Yi Xian. If it were used outside, this attack would be enough to destroy tens of millions of lives. Yi Xian was silent. Yi Jiming added, no matter when, it's never wrong to treat this universe kindly. Yi Xian nodded, I understand. Yi Jiming suddenly returned the Tao scripture to Yi Xian. I finished reading it. Yi Xian took the Tao scripture and asked, did you gain any enlightenment? Yi Jiming said softly, this scripture contains the Tao of the universe. As that old man said, if it falls into the hands of the wicked, it will be a disaster. Yi Xian smiled. Did Miss Yi gain any enlightenment from it? Yi Jiming shook her head. Some, but it's not that helpful to me. Yi Xian was confused. What? Yi Jiming did not speak. But Yi Xian understood. Why was it not that helpful? Because he was strong. Just like this Tao scripture would not be of much help to Mu Nianyan, because Mu Nianyan was strong enough. Yi Xian blushed with shame. Why was it that every woman he met was more perverted than the next? Yi Jiming said softly, I want to find the destiny scroll. Yi Xian said solemnly, the fourth scroll? Yi Jiming nodded. That scroll should have what I want. Yi Xian asked, do you know where it is? Yi Jiming hesitated, then shook his head. I don't know. However, I know that it will definitely appear soon. Yi Xian was confused. What? Yi Jiming said calmly, why are you asking so many questions? Yi Xian was speechless. Yi Jiming continued, anyway, that's what I predicted. Yi Xian was a little curious. You can tell fortunes? Yi Jiming nodded. A little. Yi Xian hurriedly pointed at himself. Tell me how my fortune is. Yi Jiming glanced at Yi Xian. I'm not qualified to read your fortune. Yi Xian was speechless. Yi Jiming glanced at the surroundings and said, there was too much commotion here just now. It might have alarmed many people. Let's go. Yi Xian nodded, and then he vanished with Yi Jiming. Not long after Yi Xian and Yi Jiming disappeared, a shadow suddenly appeared in the field. The shadow watched Yi Xian and Yi Jiming disappear into the distance. No one knew what it was thinking. At this moment, a voice came from behind the figure. Why didn't you make a move? The figure said softly, that young man isn't simple. The voice said, what's there to be afraid of? Kill him. The mysterious man suddenly turned around and clenched his right hand. Suddenly, a ferocious-looking beast appeared in his hand. The beast looked like a puppy with 2 horns and 3 eyes. It had a ferocious face, and an extremely strong evil aura was being emitted from its body. The figure said, don't attack without my orders. Understand? The beast wasn't afraid at all. Its figure shook and struggled free of the figure. In the next moment it was over 1 kilometer away. Chapter 1274. In the starry sky, after Yi Xian shouted that sentence, he spat out another mouthful of blood. Bodhisattva Aku stared at Yi Xian. You want to frame the pure land of ultimate bliss. Unfortunately, the world might not believe you. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly looked behind Bodhisattva Aku and said in shock, You are... Bodhisattva Aku turned his head subconsciously. However, there was nothing in front of him. Bodhisattva Aku's expression changed drastically and he turned around abruptly. Bodhisattva Aku's pupils suddenly constricted. In the depths of his eyes, a wisp of sword light was getting bigger and bigger. Bodhisattva Aku was horrified. He put his palms together and a ball of Buddhist light blocked the wisp of sword light. However, at the next moment, the wisp of sword light sliced his hands and flashed past his throat. Bodhisattva Aku's body stiffened and the Buddhist light around him dissipated rapidly. Meanwhile, Yi Xian was still opposite him. Bodhisattva Aku looked at Yi Xian in disbelief. You're so strong. As soon as he finished speaking, he disappeared without a trace. Instant kill. Bodhisattva Aku did not expect that he would be killed by Yi Xian in an instant. He was an ultimate self-release realm expert. However, Yi Xian had killed him in an instant. How was that possible? Even at death, Bodhisattva Aku's heart was filled with doubts. Yi Xian looked at Bodhisattva Aku who had completely disappeared. He waved his right hand and Bodhisattva Aku's storage ring flew into his hand. At this moment he finally understood how big the difference was between a fake ultimate self-release realm and a real one. It was really a world of difference. At this moment, dozens of powerful auras appeared. Yi Xian hurriedly knelt on one knee and covered his chest with both hands. He coughed violently and blood flowed out of his mouth from time to time. At first glance, this injury wasn't just a normal heavy injury. When Jiang Yu and the rest saw Yi Xian's appearance, they were stunned. So miserable? Yi Xian was still coughing. As he coughed, more blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. The blood flowed down from the corner of his mouth and directly dyed his body red. At this moment he was simply covered in blood. From his appearance, he was as miserable as he could be. Jiang Yu glanced at Yi Xian, and he hesitated for a moment before he said, Young Master Yi, your injuries are quite severe. Yi Xian pointed to the far right, his eyes filled with resentment. The realm of ultimate bliss they snatched my study room. Jiang Yu followed Yi Xian's finger, but he didn't see anything. Meanwhile, Li Qing from Dao Village suddenly said, Young Master Yi, are you sure? Yi Xian glanced at Li Qing who was speaking. He wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and nodded. Li Qing stared at Yi Xian as if she was trying to see through Yi Xian. Chapter 1279. Mu Yanyan shook her head when she saw Lu Junbai take his last breath. How can you compare yourself to someone who has a backer? Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, and then he said, Sister Nian, I didn't rely on anyone to reach self-release. Mu Yanyan looked at Yi Xian. Did that Yi Jiming help you? Yi Xian said in a low voice, She is not my backer. Mu Yanyan said, Why did she follow you and help you? Yi Xian was stunned. He really hadn't thought about this question. Mu Yanyan said, Because she wanted to borrow the strength of the person behind you. Yi Xian frowned slightly. A woman in a plain dress? Mu Yanyan rolled her eyes at Yi Xian. What else do you think? Yi Xian fell silent. Mu Yanyan said, Am I considered your backer? Yi Xian hurriedly nodded. Yes. Mu Yanyan smiled. Then did I wrongly accuse you? Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, and then he shook his head. No. Sister Nian, is it really because of reading and studying that you reached the true release one realm? Mu Niannian smiled. What do you think? Yi Xian fell silent. Mu Niannian said in a soft voice, self-release refers to escaping from the Grand Tao and becoming the one outside the Grand Tao. However, many people don't even know what the Grand Tao is. Since they don't know the Grand Tao, how did they escape? Yi Xian said in a low voice, but Mu Niannian suddenly said, did you really escape from the Grand Tao? Yi Xian looked at Mu Niannian. Mu Niannian smiled. Strictly speaking, you can't be considered to have truly escaped from the Grand Tao. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, how is that possible? Mu Niannian smiled and said, there are actually 3 realms of self-release. The first is what the world calls false self-release. I won't say much about this. The second type is like you. You have indeed escaped from the Great Tao, but you have escaped from the Great Tao. Yi Xian frowned. What do you mean? Mu Niannian said, the third is Tao validation. Escaping from the Great Tao could only mean escaping from the scope of the Great Tao. Proving the Tao referred to the fusion of oneself and the Tao after thoroughly understanding the Great Tao. Self-release in reality is still within the Tao. However, few people can corroborate the Tao, merge themselves with this Tao. As she spoke, she gazed at the spot where Lu Junbai had perished earlier, and she said with a smile, do you know why his sword move was useless against me? Because I've already attained the Tao and I'm one with everything in the world. How could the might of a single person shake the might of the world? Yi Xian said in a deep voice, what about breaking the Tao? Mu Niannian looked at Yi Xian and said with a smile, you even know about breaking the Tao. Looks like that woman told you a lot of things. Yi Xian nodded. Mu Niannian smiled and said, breaking the Tao refers to surpassing the Tao, standing above the Tao, truly not within the rules. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, Sister Nian can see that this stone tablet is extraordinary? Mu Niannian nodded, touch it. Yi Xian nodded, he walked to the stone tablet and placed his right hand on it, and just as his right hand touched the stone tablet, boom, Yi Xian was suddenly sent flying. He flew hundreds of feet away. When Yi Xian stopped, he was completely dumbfounded. His entire right arm was gone. After all, his whole body cracked and blood splattered. This had almost destroyed his physical body. Yi Xian raised his head to look at the stone tablet, and his face was filled with confusion. What is this thing? How strong was his physical body now? Besides true self-release realm experts, ordinary people could not even think of harming his body. However, that power just now had directly destroyed his physical body. No, it was Mu Niannian who made a move. Yi Xian noticed that Mu Niannian had taken a step back, and Mu Niannian must have blocked a part of the power for him, otherwise he would not have lost his arm, but would have died on the spot. Yi Xian walked to Mu Niannian's side and smiled bitterly, Sister Nian, look at me, I'm so miserable. Mu Niannian rolled her eyes at Yi Xian, who told you to touch it? Yi Xian was stunned, didn't you tell me to touch it? Mu Niannian blinked, did I tell you to touch it? Yi Xian almost collapsed, did you not? Mu Niannian smiled sheepishly. I was wrong just now. What I meant was that you use a sword to touch it, use the green-robed man's sword. Yi Xian looked at Mu Niannian, not saying anything. Mu Niannian blinked, don't tell me you want to hit me? Yi Xian's mouth twitched and he forced a smile, no, I don't have that thought. Mu Niannian stared at Yi Xian, I feel that you have that thought. Yi Xian quickly shook his head, no, it's my fault. I didn't understand Sister Nian's words, it's my fault. Mu Niannian nodded, it's good that you know you're in the wrong. Come, continue touching it. Yi Xian felt bitter in his heart. Yi Xian walked to the front of the stone tablet, and instead of using his hands he took out the sword spirit. Yi Xian looked at Mu Niannian, Sister Nian, it won't be dangerous, right? Mu Niannian shrugged, it depends on whether the owner of the sword has enough face. Yi Xian hesitated and then said, Sister Nian, why don't you touch it? Is it because of your face? At this point he seemed to have thought of something and quickly stopped talking. Mu Niannian gave him a half-smile, what do you want to say? Yi Xian quickly shook his head, no, I don't want to say anything. With that, he turned around and pointed at the stone tablet with the sword spirit. But soon he stopped. At this time Mu Niannian said, don't worry, it won't hurt the sword. Yi Xian was a little confused, Sister Nian, even my body can't take it, this sword? Mu Niannian looked at Yi Xian, brother, wake up, this sword is stronger than you. Yi Xian was speechless. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.